It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Hashtag Event Icons, presented by Endless Entertainment, the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is Hashtag Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Entertainment, Laura Lopez of Social Tables, and Sean Holiday of Crowd Mics.
Woo! What an exciting episode.
I love that. I like that, Will.
The new intro, yeah. So these guys are the first time they've heard it since they weren't here last week, but super duper excited to be here, guys. Excited for this episode. This is gonna be a little unique than most episodes. Most of the time, we have amazing guests in here who are, getting to ask questions. People, I'll talk myself. These guys are awesome, but a little bit more exciting than me. But this week marks a very special date, and it kind of came faster than we expected it to. And it's been 1 year since we started Hashtag Event Icons.
Since you started Hashtag
a year
Event
ago,
Icons, my friend.
It was a team effort. So, you guys get to celebrate in this. But, yeah, 1 whole year since we've been doing this. 39 episodes. We had that break where we were going monthly for a couple months. But it's just, insane. I can't believe how fast time has gone. Laura, can you believe it? It's been a year yet.
I can't believe it. It just flew by somehow, and it's already been a year. It's crazy.
And Sean, it's been a whole year since you hopped on that blab, literally a year ago, and we're like, what's up?
I've been here ever since, man. I've been here ever since. I'm glad I get to be on this side of it as well. Not just, I was a super fan first, and now on this side it's awesome. So it's crazy, dude. Super proud of you.
Awesome. Well, no, I'm proud of you guys. I'm just so excited to have you guys here, and this is going to be a little bit of a fun episode for all of us because we're going to be doing a little bit of reflection. So we've done a couple episodes where obviously everyone on the show has been interviewed in some sort of fashion. So you guys kind of know our backstories and what we're all about. So we didn't want to do that, but instead we wanted to kind of talk about what's happened in the last year. And I think Laura had the great idea. She's like, let's recap. Let's do the most epic recap of the last year possible and kind of talk about what we're excited for. So really, really excited. We have a couple questions that we kind of lined up on our end that we kind of want to ask each other and talk about. And then at the, just as usual, we're going to open it up to you guys to ask questions. So if you want to know something about Hashtag Event Icons, whether it's, how we do the show or what do we have in store for next year, maybe we'll tell you. Basically, get those questions ready and we'll be ready to rock. But before we jump right on in, I kind of want to start with a general question because we're going into the end of the year. It's been 1 whole year, and a lot of things have changed in the events industry. So I want to kind of know what's kind of piquing your interest when it comes to the events industry, whether it's a cool piece of tech, a trend, what's kind of catching your eye right now. So, Laura, why don't you kick it off? I know you've got a lot of really cool things that are really getting you excited for the events industry right now.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed over the course of this past year, which was one of those pending trends that, me personally, I didn't really think was really going to manifest itself, is VR, AR, those kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that planners are really outdoing themselves with these experiential events. So one example, and I don't know if you all have been watching this, but Westworld, it's on HBO.
I love Westworld.
The season finale just happened. Yeah, and I read up on how they promoted it, and they did sort of a virtual reality, I don't want to say cave, but it was an experience where you could go in and sort of virtually experience what somebody in the show would do if they were going to Westworld. And that's
cool.
So incredible, and that's such a cool thing for a planner to create, for a brand activation, really just bringing people in. So I thought that was just totally incredible.
Have either of you guys gotten a chance to experience doing VR stuff? Have you guys put the headsets on and kind of played around with it?
Oh yeah, Yeah, there's an awesome company here in DC called Notion Theory, and they've come to our office. They do meetups. They're really trying to get people exposure to VR. So they've come in here. They've done lunch and learn. So I've done it a handful of times, and it's just totally incredible. It gets better and better, month over month, not even every single year. So I think we're going to start seeing some more of those experiential events and looping in VR. So
Cool.
that's something that's huge there.
That's really cool. Sean, what about you? What would be something that you love in the events industry right now?
Me?
Yeah. Yes,
think-
you. The only
yeah,
Sean.
I didn't hear you say Sean.
Is there another Sean
I
in
thought you
there?
said, hey, dude. I was like, is there? Hey. Something I think, what trends or news, one thing I'm excited is to see is like who's the up and coming kind of news publication. We've had these same kind of, groups that are doing amazing. Not they're doing awesome. It's just always interesting to see kind of that next like Product Hunt out of nowhere, just came out of nowhere in the last 5 years and just really provided value. I'm curious to see kind of maybe a surge there. Also very interested in the big data that's going on right now. Just a lot of our guests on this show and a lot of the questions from our audience have been around, ROI. How do I get the return on investment for these events that I'm putting on? How do I get that? Even if I do get the data, what do I do with the data? Right? You can get a million data points, but if you don't know where to put them, it doesn't do much for you. And so I think a big trend that we're seeing, and being from IMEX, where Will and I walked around a lot of the booths, we saw just they're trying to take and integrate all these pieces of data to really give a nice output. And I'm curious to see who wins. I think some of the front runners, Bizibo, I think is doing really well. Social Tables, I think, is starting to give you a really good idea around your seating and how that functions into your actual event. And then I think another big one is obviously Double Dutch. They've probably been the most vocal just about trying to get CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce and all that to take the attendee data, push it back up to the cloud, bring it back down. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, man. Is just what is that big data play, and then what's the kind of next publication to come out and push people's thoughts and theories and see what's the next thing.
Awesome. I love how all these things we've talked about so far too are things that we've done on the show. So just really, I think that this show has been awesome because it teaches me a lot about like everything going on. And I think one of the topics I know, Laura, you're really passionate about this, and you had some ideas you want to kind of chat about too, is the emergence of venues really rapidly changing. Whether it's I know you got some thoughts on this, but like my big thing is even just traditional venues. I'm seeing this turn away from hotels who used to be like the enemy, right? Where they were, trying to stack on in-house restrictions and things like that. And now everyone's realizing like you can't do that. You have to be really friendly. You have to provide this different kind of sales experience. Like for example, right now we're working to do an event at the Allegro Hotel in Chicago next week, and talking to the contact over there, Katie, who's just absolutely awesome. I give a shout out to her. She was just so fantastic to work with today. Talking to her on the phone about like, hey, we're coming in as the outside AV company. We're going to do this and this, and she made me feel like, man, she has my back. We're working together versus this adversary relationship that I didn't really know. I would see way more often, I'd say, in 2015 than I did 2016 into 2017. Lauren, I know you had some ideas like as far as like alternative venues and things like that too.
Yeah, so just piggybacking off what Sean mentioned about sort of like these dark horses, like other forces coming into the industry, maybe alternative media outlets and things like that. I think that alternative venues is going to be something that's going to be huge in the coming years, and we're already seeing it right now. So
what's an alternative
people
venue?
are realizing. Sorry?
What's an alternative venue? Would you say
Yeah, so I
beyond a
mean,
hotel, obviously, but
yeah, people are hosting events in parking lots and restaurants, co-working spaces, because they're finding that these are all areas where people can come together. It can be a blank slate, so kind of going off that whole like blank warehouse feel. So if a planner's coming in, they can do whatever they want with the space.
So real quick, we launched CrowdMics February of 2014 on stage, and with us there was a group called Peerspace, P-E-E-R, like peers, we're peers, space. They've raised about $10 million now, just recently. and give them a shout out. But what they do is they take like your studio, your dance studio, right? You're only using it from 5 to, from 5 in the afternoon till whatever. But during that day, there might be a really cool opportunity for a yoga class to come in, or there might be a really nice way for someone else to be able to use that. And so it's not only like a sharing economy of like being efficient and not having to go buy or like rent other crazy space, but I think it's starting to show that you can put events on in just really cool different places. And so I think that's going to be a big part of the future, is just the sharing economy, right? Is you can use my space from this time to this time, and it's really cool, and it's already all outfitted and decked with audio and whatever. Or cool guys like Will's going to be able to come in and make a garage feel like it's a movie theater, So
Yeah.
I think that's rad. I think that's a big part. But I think another one that's kind of outside of the bounds but really still close to home is like a Convene, right? Where they're not your traditional Marriott, big boys doing it, like, but they're also not just like a garage, office space. Like, it's a really beautiful venue that's really well done, but they do it in a really unique kind of cool way.
And shout out to Convene. We actually had the founder and CEO on the show. So if you missed that episode, I think it's 3 episodes ago, so like episode 36-ish, we had him on with Kate from Marriott as well. So you kind of get this alternative venue versus traditional venue, kind of going head-to-head kind of thing. But really, really cool conversation. So definitely check out that episode if you missed it. And kind of tie it back in. So if you are loving what we're talking about with trends, next week, I don't ever talk about future episodes because they're constantly changing and moving around, but next week we have an amazing episode lined up where we're going to be talking about 2017 event trends. So you're starting to see all these event trend articles come out every single day now at the end of the year, and we're going to be having 3 of the biggest names, 2 of which are confirmed, and 1 of which is going to be a special guest who just got on the show today. Don't want to say it because I don't want to jinx that he's not going to be able to make it, but it's going to be so exciting to have him on air finally. And these guys know who it is, so they're like, yeah. But we're going to have an amazing group for the 2017 Event Trends episode, which we do every year, which we did last year, obviously. It's only been 1 year. But
which we will do every year going forward.
Every year moving forward. There you go. So tune in next week. This episode's going to be absolutely amazing. So I want to shift it back because we can talk trends all day long, but that will be next week. I want to talk a little bit about the show and kind of where we've been this last year, where we're going, all that sort of stuff. That I think what a lot of people want to know about because we never talk about it. So I'm going to kick it off with this trivia question for you guys because you guys don't get to see the analytics, so I'm usually the master of all the analytics, getting everything posted, everything like that. These guys are in charge of all the content and everything like that. So my question to you guys is, if you had to take a guess, what episode do you think is the most popular episode from the last year that we've had? So out of all 39 episodes, or 38, I guess you'd say, which episode do you think is number 1?
Eyes are most popular in the sense of most comments and chatter. I mean, what are we talking about?
Let's do. So it's more focused on like views, so eyeballs primarily. So it's a combination of views like on the video because we track all the views on the videos post combined with how many people tuned in live. So the kind of the general audience that watched it.
That's tough.
I think this was our most commented episode and most questioned episode too. That we got a lot of there was so much buzz around it. I'm giving away what it is. So there was a lot of buzz around this episode. I obviously know what the answer is. If you're stumped, just let me know. I'm making him try to remember all 30.
I was gonna say,
that one was a really weird one, but it was like it kept cutting out a lot and like dropping, but pretty big name. I think it could be there. Aaron Kaufman, he's pretty engaging, so I think people would comment a lot. He's very vocal.
Yep.
My vote though is Julia Solaris. That's my vote.
Okay, Julia Solaris episode.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it Survivor style. I'm sorry about this, but I vote for you, Julius.
All right, Laura, what do you think your number 1 episode? What the number 1 episode was?
Okay, it's either the Control-Alt-Delete episode or the IMAX episode.
Control,
all right.
Because you smiled when you said that.
So Laura's gonna get the cake on this, and it was actually the IMAX episode where we
Ooh.
featured I think like 20 people in the span of 2 hours on the episode. We did it all live from the show floor. It was really close. It like for example, we had a couple episodes right behind it, including Aaron's, including David's, or like right on the coattails.
Wait. But I put Aaron and Julius on my kind of like movies,
True.
and they were on that
They were on
episode.
that episode.
So 2 out of
That's
3.
And that's
win.
why I think why it's so popular, that episode, is because we had all the biggest names on it, all the popular people together, and just like some amazing icons all together. So people were like, if I'm gonna watch one episode, this is gonna be the one. So yeah, it was hugely popular. We had a ton of people watching live. Oddly enough, too, though, while we get a lot of questions live during this show, and that's obviously the whole point of this show, it was actually an episode where no one asked questions the entire time. Because, I mean, and you might be asking yourself why. I attribute it to two facts, possibly the fact that we did 15-minute long interviews, so they're like that. So you imagine like we were doing 20 people in 2 hours, it's moving pretty quick. But also, I think most people were just like starstruck. You're just like, everyone's dropping knowledge bombs, and then you're on to the next one. Like, it was kind of like this just sprint of awesome technology. So yeah, most popular episode of 2016 and 17, or 2016 and 15, end of 15, I guess you'd say, is that IMAX episode. So if you missed the IMAX episode, go check it out for sure. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about that episode because that was such an ironically iconic episode for us. All right, so I'm going to let Laura kick it off with the questions that we kind of have nailed down for each other with our first question that we have. And let's see, I want to make sure that you guys have access to that document too, and I just sent it over to you just so you have that question too.
All right. So on the show, we have anywhere from, one guest where we'll do an AMA style interview, and then sometimes we'll have 3 to 4 guests on the show. So we have a lot of favorite guests that show up, a lot of industry friends. So Sean, I'll start with you this time. Did you have any favorite guests from this past year?
So this one sounds kind of corny and weird, like, who's your favorite guest? I'm like, you know what? It was my favorite episode, I think, was actually just me and Will, man.
Oh,
Like,
the one where you interviewed me.
Yeah, this boy.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. It kind of feels gimmicky. But what? Like, for reals though, it was a good episode. Me and Will have been buddies for a while, and like, it was good to get deeper with him and just have fun and get to kind of share with the audience and the group and just get to know him better myself. And so that actually was probably one of the funnest because we didn't really have anything scripted and took a bunch of questions from people like in the audience. That was like most of it. And I don't know. That's one of my favorite.
Let's see. I think that's episode 29 for all of those who are curious. So 10 episodes ago.
That's how old I am.
You interviewed me, and that was a good episode. I love that episode too. I that was one of my favorite ones, just because for once too I didn't have to host, so I was like, I was chilling. I was getting like, I was sitting back like, yeah, you ask me the questions, I'll answer them. Okay, I got this. This is easy. It's like,
It was good.
all right. Good.
Well, do you have any favorite guests from the past year?
Oh, I had some favorite ones. So obviously, like, it's hard because it's like they're all your children, right? I think you mentioned it earlier, Sean, is the Aaron Kaufman and Kevin White episode, the shit event planner say episode we did. It was just an idea that we had. I think it was either at IMAX or something like that. We came up with it. We're sitting, having a beer with Aaron and Kevin, and we're like, all right, we gotta do this episode. And it was one of my favorites because of how relaxed it was. I think Aaron does that a lot. He's such a relaxing, like, well, I don't know, relaxing is the right word, but he's such a casual person that
Personable.
it brings your whole like guard down. So instead of like being very formal interview, it's very much like we were just talking, and things are going good when you're in the flow, and like before you know it, I was looking at the clock and I was like, it's been an hour. Like, can we go for another 2 hours? Like, this is like one of the best episodes by far, and I really enjoyed having them both on the show because it was just such a blast. And then me as an AV guy, so I had a lot of really great guests, but one of my favorites was the guys from that did the first 4K live stream at South by Southwest. It's one of the first episodes we have. I can't remember which one it is. It's episode 8, and basically we interviewed these guys who somehow had someone said, hey, we want to do a live stream, and they're like, let's do it in 4K. It was like at the bleeding edge of 4K, and they somehow put together all these technologies, and it was like this ragtag group of people pulling it all together, and they pulled it off, and it was like one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. And so me as like an AV guy, it was exciting to talk to them from a technical perspective, but also because this is something that, you know, is probably going to be commonplace in, you know, 2-3 years now. To get to see what it was like when they first created this was just really, really exciting. And those guys are awesome. Now I work with them on a bunch of projects too, so really, really exciting to have the guys from the 4K live stream, episode 8. What about you, Laura? You got a ton of them.
Let's see. So many to choose from. I would say I'm going to second the Aaron Kaufman episode. He is probably one of my favorite people in the events industry, and he just keeps it real. So I'm all about that. And that was a really fun one. Another one that I really enjoyed was Bridget Zingale, who is with HubSpot. So she does events all the time for HubSpot. And for me especially, I sit in the marketing communications department and also do events. So it was really cool almost talking to a peer of mine to see how another tech company puts on events and how they measure ROI. Again, super important. Because, you know, my client is Social Tables, so that's, you know, that's who I'm putting events on for. So it was really cool to kind of like compare notes almost. And so that episode, it was just she and I doing an AMA. So that was a really, really cool one. Another
Episode 22, by the way, for those who are curious.
Episode 22. And then the Control-Alt-Delete episode. So for anybody who's tuning in and isn't familiar with Control-Alt-Delete, so that was an event that Dahlia Elgazar, Liz King, and Aaron, I guess, Aaron Kaufman put together. It was an all-distributed, nearly all-digital event. So really, really cool. So we had a lot of the speakers come on for event icons to just talk about how the event came about, and it was just a good rambunctious bunch of event professionals. It was great. It's great.
I got to add one more.
One more.
That episode with Julius, because I think it just comes back down to just being just real. Like, I like when people are just, even if it's a little controversial, it seems like a little like edgy. Like, oh, did he just say that?
Yeah.
Like, I love that episode because he just was like, he literally like was in his office like standing up and he's like, I'm going to tell you right now. And I was like, whoa. Just listened in. So
that's even his personality.
You know what's awesome too? Is all those episodes were like back to back too. So Bridget's episode is 22, Julius's episode is 23, and then 24 was a Control-Alt-Delete. We must have been like in our zone like in those last episodes.
Yeah.
So I want to transition real quick to awesome guests. No question that we had some really, really cool people on, which is just shows that, you know, this does provide value, and you should be listening or telling other colleagues to listen. These are big names. But what was the biggest thing? We'll start with Laura. What was the biggest thing you learned, you know, from the shows? And if you can remember who shared it, or maybe you just remember the idea of it. But what are some of the biggest things you learned?
Well, I would say, like, this platform, Event Icons, live video, and just is a huge untapped resource for industry education. And, you know, I think the whole idea where Event Icons came from is that, you know, we feel like a lot of these, you know, who we think are like celebs in the event industry are just so untouchable. Like David Adler, like I fangirl anytime somebody mentions David Adler, but he's actually he's way more approachable than you think. And if you just ask people to share their tips with you, you know, they're very open to doing it. And so I really think that's a testament to the industry that we're in. And so I think that for our industry, live video is just hugely untapped. Previously, I don't know, for anybody who's watching, I don't know how long you've been watching, but we used to host Event Icons on a platform called Blab, which is no longer supported. RIP, rest in peace. And, you know, it's no longer supported, but it was a really, really great tool. And I think that as more and more people discover that live video is going to be a huge resource, there's going to be an influx of, or my prediction anyways, is that there's going to be a huge influx of new companies who are willing to kind of pick up where Blab left off. to support, any industry that wants to incorporate live video and engagement into, maybe not necessarily an event, but just sort of like a, meeting like this. So that's, I think it'd be huge.
I think I got the same thing.
Real quick, before I want to interrupt real quick. We also have someone in the audience who threw in the question. By the way, if you want to put comments in the question mark, that's totally allowed too. But Karen, one of our awesome listeners who watches almost every episode, so thank you for joining us, Karen. She said that discovering about Eric Lee, LY, which was episode 28 on BizDev and events. Now she uses Presdo Match for all of her events because of it.
Nice.
So awesome that we got some discovery going on during as well. So just want to shout that in there.
And we had another one, Billy May, who was the Power of
Episode
Video.
34.
We connected them while on the episode, and he ended up doing the video with the group. So literally, the power of live is just resource you didn't know, connect it, it happens, and everybody goes on their way. So I think that's super cool. And I think one thing that I would point out is you got to be patient with this live game. Like Gary Vee can turn it on, Casey can turn it on, and they'll get pretty good numbers still. Like 100, like 1,000 people or 2,000 people live. Like you think about that. Like Casey can put a video on YouTube and get 5 million views, but he can only get 1,000 or 2,000 people live. So if your numbers aren't crazy. Right, that's partially why I think Periscope and Meerkat, because people themselves were posting and thinking they're going to get just hundreds of eyes, and it's a long game. People come back to this. If you do it right, they'll come back to your episodes, and it'll be evergreen, content. And so I think just on that topic, you got to do it because it's good, worthwhile content, not just hoping people come and watch you for a couple minutes. So, anyways, Will, what about you? What's the biggest thing you learned, man?
Oh, so I thought it was really interesting. I was going to get to this. I think we have another question later about resources. But one of the things I think that most common that we would hear people say, like people would share lots of cool tech resources, but the most common thing I think I heard as a trend every couple episodes was people would be like taking inspiration offline, disconnecting, basically things along those lines. Like basically get away from the computer, get away from the industry, and find inspiration in other places. So that was probably one of the biggest learnings I had. Like me, I'm a very energetic person, so a lot of times I'm just go, 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 go. But if I can take a break and breathe, and I remember that was one person's advice. Another person was like, hey, go find inspiration other places. Go find inspiration. Go walk outside. I heard to walk outside, I think 3 or 4 times during episodes this year. So, I think that was really cool. Great learning. And it was something that always caught us off guard because we were expecting a tech tip or an app or a book or a blog article, and we heard these like, hey, just get out of here. So, what about you, Sean? What was your biggest learning?
I think one thing I just learned, it's kind of funny, Laura's wasn't so much like a hard thing, like David Adler said this, Julia said this. It was more like an experience. I think the part of it for me was one like really eye-opener was Control-Alt-Delete, was just an event was supposed to happen, and we were actually contacted by the event organizer, and in Amsterdam, we're going to go throw this down, CrowdMike should come out and do it, and we were like everyone else was like super excited, and it didn't end up happening, which I totally get where he's coming from. Sometimes things just fall through, and it happened to him in a really big, very vocal way, which stinks, but sometimes it happens to everybody just on a different level. But I saw the community, right? I saw this group come together in such a cool, like organic, authentic way, and that really was the eye-opener for me. And so it's sending these emails, sometimes cold emails to people and being like, hey, can I catch you, for a minute, and will you come on our show for an hour and talk to our audience and give them your insights and your thoughts? And to see people respond so well, I mean, you can see all these names and really awesome people. For me, it was just this industry and this market and the way it responded to learning and wanting more knowledge. And so super excited that this this group of people right here took the leap of faith and went for it, but also that all those that have joined, those that are listening, really believe in good content, I think.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned.
I love good content. I think that's why I made the show.
Yeah.
Of good content. Awesome. I'm really glad that we all got together for this one.
Mm-hmm. It was good. So Will had mentioned this earlier. We were talking about resources. So usually we close up every show pretty much the same way, where we ask, different resources that you can share with the audience. Karen just mentioned that she learned about Eric Lee and Presto Match, so that was obviously a great tool and resource that she's used. But I'm curious to know from you guys, and we'll start with you. What is your favorite resource that was shared by a guest?
Ooh. This is obviously my favorite question. I feel like every time we ask these, that's why I interject my resources after everyone says their resources, because I always have cool things I'm sharing. So,
who's my guy? You know you have that guy, like,
that gives you all the
hey,
apps.
you're that guy. Like, Will's that guy for me. I'm like, dude, what do I need? He's like, you need
What's the
this
best
now.
CRM? I will rank them to you from top to worst in all order.
Pricing, like, he'll know the guy there.
Pricing.
Like, you need to talk to him. Oh, wow.
Exactly. All right,
So-
cool. So I got a ton of resources. So my favorite is the scuba mask. So
Who
if
was
you don't,
that?
it's a super awesome inside joke. If you haven't been watching all the episodes, I have to find it. I'm looking through all the list if I can find it really quick, so I don't.
Yeah, I'm
Was it- what
trying. I
episode?
forget his name.
Oh
I
my
think I was
God,
on
cool.
that.
Here, it's episode 17 on event engagement,
His
and
name,
Heiner has the best event
Heiner!
resource
Heiner,
ever.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
So if you get a chance, watch episode 17. Just even if you can't watch the whole episode, you're not interested in event engagement, it's worth it just to go to that section in the last 10 minutes to watch what resources that he shares. And one of them is a scuba mask. So I'll just leave it at that. That's one of our favorites. We always talk to our guests and we explain to them, hey, share anything you want to share. It could be even a scuba mask. And I think that luckily it happened because before we were just saying apps and books, but when we say that, it got people to I think, and that's where the offline inspiration stuff started to come from. So super duper awesome. To apps and cool unique things, so obviously I'm that guy who's on top of everything, product hunt 24/7. But one of my favorite things I shared that I didn't even know existed was Christian from Red Frog shared the Rocketbook Wave, which is basically a book that you write in and you stick it in the microwave after and microwave it, and it erases everything. So it's like a reusable notebook, and I think it you can capture it, you take pictures of it, and it captures onto your phone, and just really cool offline meets online world kind of technology. Plus, when you're I get to microwave my notebook, it got us all curious, what are you talking about? And then some of my favorite resources I think from the year are people that we've had on the show, which I didn't know much about their softwares, but then because we had them on the show, I got to know a little bit more about them and what they do. So things like Bizzabo, they're awesome now. We use them for a lot of registration stuff and event management stuff. Glisser, really, really awesome. We actually got to meet up in London as well when I was there. Looped, which is just a really cool bridging of iBeacons and everything like that. Brian's company is really awesome. And then Slido too. We've been using Slido a lot as well. So just really, really exciting. As well as obviously these two as well. I think every day I get on a call that someone mentions either Social Tables or Crowd Mics in some sort of way. So I'm always yeah, I love those guys. They're awesome. So
Thank
these
you.
guys too. These guys' softwares are awesome. So,
Yes.
what about you? What about you, Laura? What would be your go-to resources that you have found?
I was also going to mention the scuba mask. That was by far, the most interesting one that I saw. But let's see here. Chris Kelly from Convene, he's one of the co-founders. He mentioned this really awesome app. It's called Hiya. So Hiya, it's HIYA, and it is meant to block spam calls. So I also manage our conferences and trade shows for Social Tables. So my phone number is on every registration document out there. And there's one year where we attended 75 shows. So I get spam calls all the time because I know that they release some of the data. So I really needed something to kind of put that in check. So that was one. And also I was going to say Slido and Bizzabo, two awesome companies doing some really, really cool things in the way of, pre-event engagement. Bizzabo has a community side to the registration, and then Slido has some in-event engagement tools. So those are great. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Before we move on to the next question, want to take a quick break in the middle of the show before we ask our last question and opening it up to AMAs. And we have some very unfortunate, sad news to share. We didn't want to do it at the beginning of the episode because we didn't want to be a Debbie Downer, but unfortunately we had to make it now because we want to make sure this person was present while we did this news sharing. But unfortunately, one of the people, our amazing co-hosts, has to leave the show. And unfortunately, Sean is so busy. He's got so much stuff going on. He's got basically balancing event icons with everything. Unfortunately, Sean is going to be leaving the show as a co-host. He'll still be sticking around, so he'll still be around and helping out a little bit and being around in the events industry.
I'll still pop on.
Don't worry, he'll be here. But I wanted to give a huge thank you to Sean for your year of service and amazing volunteering. If you didn't know, that everyone volunteers to make this happen, volunteering to help make this show happen. So if we can get a big virtual applause to Sean, we are just so happy to have you as a co-host on the show.
Awesome show, super fan. I'll be watching. I'll still jump on episodes. I'm not gone by any means. I just couldn't give enough, real dedication and heart. I mean, you should see what these guys do. Alex as well, who's on Twitter if you're there in the Twitter world. Just so much time and effort. It really is not just a matter of turning on the camera and here we are. There's a lot of back-end emails I have to go back and forth. Laura does a lot of the content and questions and making sure it's all prepped and everybody's ready. And so not being able to really put forth my best effort. I'll still be providing contacts and leads and making sure these guys know all the people I know and getting them on the show, just not as dedicated, and I won't be able to put quite that time in. So it's been an honor. Laura, I've seen you. We're buds. Will, come on, whatever. Alex. Air hug. Thumbs up, man. Virtual hug. Actually, I have to go now before the AMA. So tweet me anything. I'm always here, Sean at CrowdMics, crowdmics.com. And I'm a fan of the show. You be a fan of the show. These guys are awesome. Thank you. That's my last goodbye.
We love you, Sean. Thank you so much. Cue the sad country music.
If they had it on earlier. So, okay, see you guys.
Love you, Sean. We'll see you soon. Really sad to see Sean leave, but like Sean was talking about, there's a lot of back-end things that go into the show, and I'm sure I see our questions are starting to pop up about people asking about what goes into the show during this as well, so I'm sure we're going to get to your guys' questions asking about what goes into hashtag event icons, and you'll get to see hopefully a little bit about all the work that goes in. So, from a sad note to more questions. We're not done yet. One show's not over yet. Don't leave. Yeah. So we're going to jump right back into it and talk a little bit about 2017. So you and I are kind of going into the battle in 2017, and I'm sure everyone's wondering what's coming up. And like I said, I like to keep things like hush-hush as far as future episodes. But I want to kind of see, even if, people that we not necessarily have on the schedule, but people we want to see or excitement that you want to see. I'd love to know, Laura, you've been doing this with me for so long. Who do you want to see in 2017? What kind of guests do you want to see on the show? Someone you fangirl over?
Yeah, I would definitely fangirl over these folks. But I would love to see some celeb event planners. Those folks who do, super, super, super high-touch events where, maybe they're doing events for another celebrity. That'd be really cool. And then also, I would love to know or get to know the planners who do the big events that we all attend as event professionals. So the special event is one, Catersource, IMAX, how do they plan IMAX? How do they scout out the locations? And because there's so many moving parts for those, so I'm sure it would just be an epic episode. And then lastly, kind of piggybacking off celeb event planners is I would love to meet some of the planners who've planned really, really famous, super high-profile events like Apple every year when they reveal all the products. How do they ship the products there? Is it in a special cage that only one person has, or just stuff like that? Fashion shows are really, really interesting that I don't think enough planners are talking about. they're very like fly by night. They're not going to last longer than like 15 minutes. So just understanding how to, if you only have 15 minutes to make an impact for your brand, like who needs to be in the room, how do you coordinate it? Like those are just super, super interesting. And then also, the Grammys, the Academy Awards, the Cannes Film Festival, stuff like that. Like anything that's just really, really high profile, I would just love to meet the planners to see how they do that. But that's
I'm always trying to get like the super high profile people in here too. I mean, the icons, obviously.
Yeah.
Very much so. Speaking of icons, luckily every once in a while we get our guests to come and watch the show as well. And right now, the man, the myth, the legend we were just talking about for like half the show, Aaron Kaufman is actually watching. And Aaron says, and I will agree with this, he wants to see a shit event planner say part 2. And so I think we're going to see that happen. Possibly. So that's something I definitely want to see. I know Laura wants to see it as well. I think Aaron wants to see it. I think everyone watching right now is like clamoring for another one of those episodes. Maybe we can make that the #1 watched episode very soon.
Yes.
So
I would love that. That'd be great.
If I had to pick two people, I tried to limit my list because obviously like I have my running wish list that we're always constantly attacking. But 2 people I think that are really, really cool that we're working really hard to try to get. So if any of you guys know them, I'd love to have them on show. One is Preston Bailey. Preston Bailey is a huge, high profile, again, and iconic event wedding designer. And if you've ever been to his website, it's cool. He impressed me. The first time I was getting into events, I saw his website, and you slide the thing where it shows a before and after. It shows like this dirt lot, alternative venue, and then turns into this amazing like tent built thing, amazing stuff. So Preston Bailey would be amazing to have as a designer and as a wedding planner for sure. He's absolutely amazing. And then timely as well is that love to get Amy Cool. Actually, if you don't know what Amy Cool is, I believe I'm saying her name the right way. She plans the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. So if you didn't know who's behind that, we're trying to get her on the show. I'd love to see her because that's an event that is televised, is so iconic, and it also requires something that not a lot of people think about, which is the logistics of shutting down basically that whole area. It's a very public event, very high profile, and I'd be curious to see how security works, all that sort of stuff. So that'd be 2 amazing guests to have. Those are on my wish list for sure. All right, so that's like I think all of the questions that we kind of had written down that we came to. So now we have a ton of audience questions, including tons of comments I see in here as well. For example, Aaron thinks that we should have Sasha Souza, is that how you say her name, on the show as well? So we're going to have to get with you on that on the show as well. So so anyways, we got a ton of questions to go through, so I want to start going through all the audience questions that we have. I'm going to pick one. Let's start with this. So I think people are kind of curious. I see a lot of questions asking about like what it's like being the host. So I think one question that someone asked was, what's the most interesting part about hosting the show? So I'd be curious to know, Laura, on your end, you had never hosted a podcast or a live show before doing this. Is that right?
No, this is my first go.
Okay. And what's the most interesting part about hosting the show for you?
I would say very much like planning an event, a lot of the logistical stuff happens before. And so I think if you have all of, everything sort of down pat ahead of time, you're going to have a really good show. So, and I think it's funny that we're events people and we're hosting this because, all the hard work for an event happens like before. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen the day of, but if you're prepared, you're good. So I would say that's the #1 most interesting thing. I would say #2 is gleaning the hosts. So like I mentioned earlier, you'd just be really surprised at how willing people are to be on the show. If you just let them know, hey, this is purely educational, we would love to pick your brain. In a public forum, people they will sign on board super fast. So that was very interesting, surprising on my end. But Will, since you've been doing this a little bit longer than I have, what do you think is the most interesting part about hosting the show?
So at first, ironically, one thing I thought was interesting was our transition from Blab to GoToWebinar. So
Mhm.
watching that happen, obviously transitioning into different platforms, that was really interesting for me on a technical perspective, as well as, how do we do the content change? How do the guests change? Because, like, for example, one of the most interesting things I think we had, and this is probably something we've never talked about publicly with everybody, is that actually GoToWebinar allows you to do up to 6 people on camera at once, I believe, or 8 people, one of the two. And on Blab, it was max 4, and that stunk so many times. We were like, no, we can only fit 3 more people on the show. That's it. And there were so many times we wanted more people, but we capped it, right? But then with GoToWebinar, we're like, wow, we can do 6 people. So like instantly we started scheduling lots of 6-person shows. And now, ironically, you think that would be a better show. More guests, more content, more voices, more excitement. And they were exciting, but we realized is that the content was just shorter. We could only fit in like 4 questions, 5 questions before time completely ran out. And we were sitting there with 20 questions from the audience still to answer in that hour. So I think the interesting thing we learned, and just one specific example, was just how the format and the content design affects the entire show. So now we're trying to focus more on going back to one-on-one interviews, one-on-two, or both Laura and I interviewing one person, that sort of stuff, versus let's put as many people on screen as possible, which kind of is fun in some cases, but in some cases is also a little chaotic. So I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
Um, I've actually I hosted an event and we had panelists and we had, was it 5 or 6 panelists? I mean, it was huge. And then that on top of that, we had a moderator. And so
Oh,
we
wow.
ran into the same issue IRL at this event. So I think that the smaller the group of people you have who you're interviewing, the more in depth you'll be able to get into the questions and the variety of questions. So I think that's for anybody that is thinking about doing a podcast or having your own web show, that's definitely a good, I would say, a learned best practice from Event Icons for sure. So,
Awesome.
yeah. Yeah. Um, so we've had just this insane variety of topics, guests, in this entire past year. Well, I'm curious to know what gives you inspiration for the show? Do you see something out in the industry, the market, that you're like, oh, we should do a show about that? Or is it, a TV show? Where do you get your inspiration from?
That's a good question. So I think the first time, the true inspiration for the creation of the show, obviously you can watch whatever episode that was. God, I feel like I was on fire with knowing exact episodes. What episode was that? Where is it? Episode 29, when I get interviewed and talk about like the starting of it all. The inspiration came that I just wanted to play around with Blab. So I really was inspired by other Blab shows. I got interviewed on a Blab show. Mike McAllen interviewed me on Blab, and I was like, "This is a cool platform. We got to do the show on this. This is really exciting." But now the inspiration really comes from a lot of other podcasts. So I'm going to name drop more episodes. Episode number 36, 3 ago, when we did the event industry podcast episode, all those guys we had on there are inspiration to me too. I listen to their podcasts, and like Brant and Mike and John, I'm just so excited when I listen to their podcasts. I'm like, man, I want to make my show as good as these guys. So a lot of inspiration comes from that. If I had to pick one outside, I guess, again, step outside, breathe, take inspiration offline, is one of my favorite podcasts I get a lot of inspiration from is Tim Ferriss's podcast. And if you've never listened to Tim Ferriss, he interviews like world-class everybody's, right? It's kind of very much like the icons of lifestyle design. So you get like these amazing interviews, but you listen to his interviews, it sounds like he's known these guys for years, and the topics they get into, the questions he asks are just phenomenal, and sometimes a really long format. For example, I'm listening to one by David Heinemeier something. He's the guy who created Ruby on Rails and Basecamp. So if you use Basecamp, he's the guy who created that. And it's a 3-hour interview. It's literally taken me a week to go through while I'm driving around and everything like that. But the questions he asks and the conversation he has is so deep. So trying to figure out, and I know a lot of other people get inspiration from his podcast, how do you take that and console that down into 1 hour, and also when doing it every single week and live, versus being able to do 3 episodes in a week and then take a week off or something like that. So that's where I think a lot of my inspiration comes for the show, for sure. So this next question. Oh, just kidding. I think Laura has a question for me.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Well, just kind of.
Wait, real quick. Audience question. Sorry, before we jump into it. Sorry. sorry. It's just too funny not to ignore. Is that Alex, who, for those who don't know, Alex live tweets. Alex Plaxton from Lil Bird Told Media live tweets this entire show on Twitter, and so he takes your comments all from Twitter, relays them to us, and he put on there. I mean, and shout out to Alex. He helps make this show happen from the video show and brings it onto the social media webs. Alex says that Game of Thrones inspires him to tweet, which probably a mix of the GIFs and the furious anger of tweeting so fast. I think that's what probably he means. Game of Thrones.
Yes. It's awesome.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's cool. So this next question, which is a great transition here, and talking about where you get the inspiration from, is really just like how do you even plan the episodes?
Oh, yeah.
So when you first started Event Icons, I mean, how did you get into a good groove of having all the content prepped, having the guests prepped? What does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the process has evolved for sure, and I still think it evolves every single week that we talk. I guess I'll talk about where it is now because the evolution's kind of crazy. So it started off really simple where I was just like emailing people, get them scheduled, send them a calendar invite, send them the Blab link, and like I tried to schedule all of it out as far in advance. And at the beginning, it was really easy to do because, I took I took 4 weeks off to plan all of them and schedule all the episodes before we started, so I had a ton done. But once you get meat of it, and as Brant would say, once you get all like your really good guests that you think off the top of your head, you get to this point where you start having to dig and really think about who you're going to have on the show. That's when it became really, really difficult. So that's when the process was really needed. So luckily, that's also when Laura and Sean got involved as well, that they were like, hey, we really want to help you make this happen. While this is difficult, we think we can help you. So the process very much now for planning an episode is that every single week, every Wednesday, Laura, Sean, and Alex now as well, and my assistant Tara, who's also one of the most amazing brains behind this show that you guys never get to meet ever. She's the one who's making sure everyone shows up on time. When they're having tech issues, if I'm in a meeting or something like that, she takes care of it. She helps make sure the show gets launched. Awesome. Tara just absolutely crushes it. She's like the silent hero of here, and Laura's nodding her head. She's like, yeah.
Yes.
So we'll basically have a meeting, and we sit there and we say, okay, so here's the schedule, and the schedule is basically a Google Sheet that lists out all the episodes, who the guests are, if they're confirmed or not, and then we sit there and say, okay, here's the gaps, and we brainstorm. And we just draw, we're like, wow, I saw this person do this. Let's just have them on the show. Let's have them on the show. A lot of times, for example, Aaron is actually recommending us and introducing us to another guest as well. Because a lot of our guests will introduce us to other guests. People on the show, you guys, whenever you guys request and tweet us and say, I want to have this person, we fanatically go after and try to get that person on the show. And then a lot of times we take inspiration, too, from just the people that the events that we love. Like we're saying, that we're looking there and say, yeah, we love the Grammys. We want to have the Grammys on the show. We'll just figure out a way. And a lot of it's bullheaded stubbornness, I think, on our end. We're we're going to figure out a way to get that person on the show, and we're going to, we'll figure it out, And it's just through networking that we end up making that happen. So then we use a process basically where we get a form from them to get their initial information. We do pre-interviews as well with a lot of our guests to basically get them for a feel of what's like being on camera and just make sure that they feel really comfortable with us as hosts. And one of the big things that you guys don't see very much too is 30 minutes before the show too, we also do a check. And it was originally designed because Blab was so horrible that it would work half the time or people couldn't figure it out. And no offense, Blab's kind of confusing. And we'd do it 30 minutes because there were so many tech issues to give us 30 solid minutes to tech check everything. Now it becomes more of a time for us to all kind of shoot the shit, I guess you would say, and kind of just talk, make sure everyone sounds really good, make sure everyone looks really good, and just make sure everyone feels really, really comfortable. And what we usually do, too, is we get a couple Kickstarter questions to go. So, for example, we have those 3 questions we ask on all the episodes. What got you in the events industry, resources, and tip that you have, and then maybe a new entry of one of the questions that we're going to ask each other today that we'll add back into that too. But then basically you guys run the show, and a lot of it is, planning of it is done on the fly. It's in my head, watching your questions come in, and me and Laura chatting, we literally do this during all the shows. We're chatting back and forth about, hey, this question came in. You want to take it? You want to take it? Or, and a lot of it's just done on the fly. I think that's one of the most impressive things I think that Sean and Laura and I have been able to figure out is how do you do this very much live show, but we aren't able to talk to each other than when we're recording and doing it live. So Yeah, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. And then I think the hardest part about it is what happens when we have a week that just no one can do it or things like that. That's the hardest thing to plan around. Or if you have a guest cancel, that's when like it goes, but that's where just the passion comes in. We have a Slack. Oh, that's something we didn't mention too. We use Slack to
Yeah.
communicate and plan everything inside of Slack. So yeah, so really, really cool. So yeah, so let me see. Well, do you want me to ask the next question that we have in here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm curious to know because I mean, you kind of came in too, and from the audience perspective, and then came in as a host. You know, why do we do video over audio? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I feel that with video, there you can see people's expressions, and obviously because we're in the events industry, we value that face-to-face interaction. And while we are all, remote, we're logging on via Blab first and then GoToWebinar, I think that there's something that you can't quite capture with with just audio, but you can with video. So those kinds of interactions, expressions, that sort of thing. Like Sean is, the ultimate ham on camera. So I mean, it's just like that. I would have if this was just audio, I would have never even known that you were gesturing that way. So I think that video captures a really unique essence of interviews that you can't quite capture, with audio. I don't know. So, Will, did you have a specific reason doing video versus audio?
Mainly because I wanted to use Blab. Actually, when we first did the show, Blab would export it in video and audio, and I would upload the audio with it too, so you could actually tune in like a podcast, and you could subscribe to it like on iTunes and everything like that. But eventually, I deliberately shut that down because I realized the show is what makes it different than every other podcast. Is that you get to see our guests, you get to see them in their homes, you get to see them relax, you get to see the gestures. And I realized that there were so many things. For example, I was gesturing and people laugh, and no one would be able to catch that in audio, right?
Right.
Where now it's like, hey, it's implied, it's video, and that's what it has to be. But I agree 100% what you said. There's so much stuff that gets left on the table if it's audio.
Yeah.
All
All right. I think we have some more audience questions here.
Yes.
Let's see.
Yes.
Here's one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you this one. This one comes from our BFF, Julia Solaris of Event Manager Blog, EMB.
Oh, awesome. I didn't even see him ask a question.
Yeah, well, it came in from Twitter.
Oh, cool.
So he asks, what can we do to disrupt an industry still largely in the hands of people very resistant to innovation? So that's a good one. And if anybody
a drop of a question right there.
That's assuming a lot of things about our industry, but
yeah.
For those of you who are watching, if you have your 2 cents that you'd like to share, we would love to hear from you. If you yourself are resistant to innovation, why is that? If you feel that you're the complete opposite, we want to hear from you. So feel free to use the chat box. But Will, what do you think? What can we do to change the industry?
Julius asked the hard question.
I know, right? I'm like, man, we only have like 5 minutes left.
I know. So the question is, how can we get them to be innovative when they're so resistant to it?
Yep.
So I think showing the benefits is probably one of the biggest things. I'm naturally a salesperson, so my natural instinct is to sell them into it, right? But I think a lot of times the reason why people are so resistant to innovation is because it's so easy to just stay doing the same thing, right? So, for example, hashtag event icons, it would have been so easy for us just to stay on Blab and not innovate and go, okay, we need to move to the next platform because it's just not working well. We're moving to the next level. Had we just stuck where we were, Blab would have shut down, and this show would have had a major blow to it because we had no way to tell our audience to come over here, all those sort of things, right? Or we would have had worse. We'd be in the middle of a show and it'd shut down, right? So I think a lot of times people love to stay away from innovation because it's so easy for you to stay with your flip phone, right? That was my parents' way for a long time. But then once you showed them the benefits of using an iPhone, they're like, why do I have a boring phone? Like, I want an iPhone now, right? So I think that's a big thing, reason why people are afraid of it. And I think that's a way we convince people is to say, hey, look, first you got to kind of shake them out of it and then show them the benefits. And sometimes it takes a little bit of coaching and sailing. What about you, Laura?
I think that the resistance to innovation is just that sheer fear of the unknown. And so I think that giving people baby steps of, testing the waters. So Social Tables is an event technology company. We have an event platform. And, very often there are people who are planning events with pen and paper. And to have to explain to somebody over the phone, this is this brand new tool. We promise it's going to help save you tons and tons of time. It's hard to really describe that, but that's why we do, demos and show them, hey, I'm going to hand the mouse over to you, and you're going to click and drag, and then we can talk through it. So making it feel a little bit more accessible, not something that's just like, ooh, technology, it's something only millennials are using. No. It's something that everyone can use and everybody can benefit from. And so really kind of making technology relatable in a way that people can understand and really grasp. So, explain to somebody, oh, this is cloud-based technology, to somebody who's playing events with pen and paper, they're not going to understand that. But if you show them, I think that's a much easier way to really sell somebody on the idea of innovation. And I think once you get them to, find whatever that gateway is, whether it's through using Slack, through using Google Docs or something, like bringing about a small change, you can eventually put them on bigger and more effective tools. So maybe showing somebody how to use a CRM, that's huge. And not everybody's using a CRM. So I think that's definitely, that's definitely one way to do it. Yeah.
Dropping the mic, Laura. I love it.
Bombs. Yes.
Awesome. So we have there's just an absolutely great conversation happening on Twitter right now. If you aren't following this conversation on Twitter on #icons, hop on there right now. But we got some industry icons also tweeting back and forth. So let's start with this. There's some comments like, for example, Aaron thinks that we should have Julius on a show with him. And they want to do an hour on dropping the gauntlet on the events industry. So really great idea for a panel. So that would be really awesome to get some of the heavy hitters. And Julius obviously had a comment back and said, I'd like to throw a Nick Borelli into the mix just to make sure that we get sued. So awesome. I love it. These guys are just absolutely fantastic. I'd say stay tuned to future episodes if you want to see some Nick Borelli for sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So question from the audience is, how can you use your platform to share real, non-biased commentary on the industry as a whole? So this is kind of diving deep into the industry and why we do this show and everything like that. But what are your kind of thoughts on the commentary for the show and how we can make sure that it's really unbiased and really focus on the industry? Laura?
Well, I think that we need to, I think it comes down to the guests that we have on the show, right? So, it's an easy ask to always ask, hey, who would you recommend on the show? But I think that for us as a host of the show, we need to always be going to people that we have never interacted with before. So I really hope that we do get Preston Bailey on the show because I have no connection to him. You don't have a connection to him. And I think that will be a good, outside voice for the show to help, lend itself to, an unbiased view on events and things like that. So I think it really comes down to probably sourcing the guests and then coming up with the content because it's very easy to bring in, say, and we've already had a show like this, a show on event technology. And then, of course, we have 4 people who are all fanatical about event technology. But for somebody, very much like to the last question, if we have somebody who's really scared of event technology, you're not going to convince them that easy. So I think if you have those opposing voices and you bring them together on one show, and not necessarily duke it out, but really bringing those opposing views to talk about in an open forum, I think that's really going to help. So we look to you guys who are logged on today's show to tell us who should we have on the show. And it can be somebody that you know personally or somebody that you don't, and probably even better in that sense. So we can have an unbiased view. So what do you think?
So I mean, I agree with you. I think the guests and designing the content is really important. We talked a lot about this, I think, the last couple episodes between all of us is that, a lot of times, for example, we design content that's easy because, this is, like you said, it's a hard job planning all these episodes.
Hmm.
One of the things I would love to see us do is, yeah, create more. Like for example, what creates a great movie? If a great movie is when, the hero and villain hang out all day long and everything's good to go and they're happy and close end credits, you're gonna be like, that boring movie was so boring. But when there's conflict, right? And excitement, you get opposing forces, people love to watch that. A, from an entertainment aspect, but also just because, like you said, I would love to get opposing opinions. So for example, we talked about, hey, maybe instead of doing, just a simple episode about venues in general, maybe we really need to bring someone in and bring in someone who's all about beating up the in-house AV guys and bring in an in-house AV guys and let them fight, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily like really fight. That'd be bad. We're not turning into a fight club for the events industry. That'd be bad. Or good. I don't know. But I think that creating some of that opposing forces and creating second opinions, but also similar to our own, bringing out outside opinions. And that's why I love bringing in people that I didn't know before the show and interviewing them and being like, wow, like Mike Piddick from Glisser. I didn't know Mike before the show, and him and we had such a great conversation that when I was in London, I was like, we got to meet up for tea, and him and I had like an hour and a half long conversation in person, and we're just talking and just enjoying it. So I really like those conversations that are brand new and getting to meet new people too, because again, it brings out new opinions than for what we're bringing in. So, great question.
So I have
Awesome.
another question here. So a question from the audience. So we're 39 episodes later.
Oh my God.
Yes. What do you think is the hardest part about running the show for, in your opinion? So.
That's a great question.
And,
So
and actually, my laptop is going to die. So while you're chatting with the audience, I'll go grab my charger. Be right back.
All right, audience, you come in nice and close. So this is such a great episode. Me and Laura were chatting. We're like, we need to keep going. So we're going to go a little bit longer than the hour because there's just so many questions from you guys. This is such a great conversation. We're going to keep going. Hopefully, Alex is able to keep going as well. But hardest part about running this show, other than sticking to the hour-long format, which we've been doing really poorly at the last couple shows, is really making sure that we are providing you guys the best content. The content is probably the hardest part, finding really, really good guests that, again, are outside of what we normally do and trying not to recycle and do things over and over again. Though we would love doing a shit event planner say part 2. But the hardest part for sure has been it's funny. Sorry, I'm like reading the chats as our team's talking, and Alex says,
Yeah.
"I'm tweeting away, but I'm running out of gifts." The danger of going over an hour. So the hardest part, I think for sure, is designing the content in a way that keeps you guys coming back every single week to want to watch live. I think that's by far the hardest part. The technology, me hosting these shows, coming up with questions. I mean, Laura does the questions, so it's easy for me, obviously. But all that sort of stuff is super duper easy. Having excitement to be on the show, I'm always excited to talk to the guests. But the hardest part for sure is creating that really strong content that doesn't get repetitive, annoying, boring, all that sort of stuff. So that's on my end. What about you, Laura? So coming into your first podcast as well, what's the hardest part about hosting the show for you?
Hardest part. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I would say probably one of the hardest things is keeping the flow going. You want to make sure it's conversational, and you want to make sure that the content is all covered, because very often we'll think of like literally any and every question to ask somebody about, like if we have an episode about venues or AV or something like that. I'll put down any and every burning question I've ever had about AV. So obviously, naturally, I want to make sure that all of it's covered, but you want to make sure that we have time to bring in audience questions and that the conversation happens organically. So it's one of those things that you plan to make sure that, if nobody shows up to today's show, how can we still have a really good conversation with our guest and between the hosts? So kind of making sure that flow feels natural. And there's a lot of communication, again, that goes on in the back end to make sure that happens. So, that can be really difficult.
Very, very difficult. Yeah, and I think that's definitely hard. One quick tip I would always have to anyone who's hosting a podcast is there's a great podcast called Showrunner,
Mm.
and it's basically from guys who basically host podcasts, and they talk about hosting podcasts. And I've been listening to it recently because I guess finally I should probably start honing in my craft of hosting a podcast. Um, a year later, and they talked a lot about like how do you keep it going? How do you not like interrupt your guests? How do you like do this the right way? And I think it's really tough too with us because we're constantly getting questions from the audience, and there's sometimes it's random. We're jumping all over the place. We're going from one topic to the other topic, and how do you kind of create this fluid stream? So while we're on the topic of that, I was literally going to ask a question about the from the audience, which is a little bit more off topic. And I might steal this one from you, Laura,
Okay.
if that's okay,
Yeah, go
unless you
for
want.
it. Yeah.
Is if you could plan one event for event professionals to fill the education gap,
Ooh.
what would your event be?
Oh my gosh, what would it be? Wow. Oh geez. What would it be, or what would it look like, or what would it be about? What? Hmm. Let's see. Education. I don't know. Well, I need to think about this one because
Okay.
there's like so much. There's so much.
Mine's really easy. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I would obviously do something about AV. I think there's
Yeah.
nothing tailored to AV specifically. In fact, if you look
Yeah.
at most event industry conferences, they're all like Brand will totally talk about this because he's basically hosting all these topics every time we do it. But there's like one session on event AV, and it's like event AV 101. I think we were talking about this at IMEX.
Yeah.
There's so many. It's like event AV 101, and it's just like so surface level, and you get an hour to cover everything AV related. So of
Mhm.
course the people come back and they're like, I wanted it to be more like in depth. But then you do more in depth and people are like, I wish it was more high level. And so
Yeah.
I think being able to do a conference around it would be really awesome. So anyone who's looking to make money on event attendees and the events industry, start a conference about AV and I will happily speak at every single thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also, Alex had a good follow-up question about, it sort of depends on what the topic is, but if we're filling in an education gap, geez. I mean, I think that there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say old school, but like very traditional, like you can get your CMP and then you go to the classes and the prep groups and then you take your exam and like that's it. And then, whatever education there is either happens on the job or, comes from a conference and, but I don't know if maybe there was something that was like recurring where there was just brand new speakers and not, and I don't mean this in like an annual event kind of way. Like obviously
Yeah.
there's like TSC and all that stuff, but
Like
I mean
every
like,
week.
yeah,
And we should call it
even
event
that,
icons.
something like, yeah, hello, event icon, but something that is a lot more accessible. Because the other thing too is that people don't have the time to travel. I mean, I personally don't have the time to go to like every event that I see every month or quarter. So I mean, something that is virtual that's actually taught by trusted people that's just a little bit more accessible. And I agree, managing the expectation on the front end of what the heck you're going to learn and like what level it is. Because very often at like Cater Source and all the different events that I go to every year, I always like to sit in to see what people are teaching about social media and about content and event marketing, and just to see if I can learn something new. But I mean, very often a lot of it's just like event marketing 101. But for somebody like me who's a marketer, an event planner, event professional by trade, I'd like to learn something that's like totally ninja, like something that I need to learn something brand new that I can implement immediately. Sometimes you learn
Registration
that.
systems.
Yeah, exactly. Like something super, super new that is, slightly more regular, and you just have industry leaders teaching it. Yeah, I think that would be awesome. And then also, we need to do away with trade shows. This is probably like super opinionated of me, but I think trade shows are dead. Yeah, I just think that we need to innovate that for sure.
A really interesting conference I was just at, and Alex was there too, was the Inbound conference for HubSpot, and they did really weird. Everyone got the same looking booth, and they weren't booths. They were more like stands, and each side had a vendor on it, and they got one TV and a high top table. That was it. and they had their logo above it, and that was it.
Yeah.
So literally inside there was tons of open space on the Club Inbound, aka their trade show floor.
Yeah.
Completely innovative, awesome, and people were walking around. I'm not sure how the ROI was for these people. I mean, I
Was it
became a
hosted
customer
by
of a
your
couple of them.
program? Was
No,
it
not really. No, not like that. Yeah, it's definitely away from like an IMAX model or yeah, hosted by her. It's very much so you're there to learn, and then there just happen to be, for example, like things that align with inbound marketing. For example,
Yeah.
GoToWebinar was there. So they had GoToWebinar set up as a booth, and obviously people who do inbound marketing also just host webinars. So it aligns. They all were very good people to have there. In fact, I use half of them as softwares, but it was like very, very casual on it, which I liked from an attending perspective. I'd be curious to see how it worked from the the trade show.
Like the exhibitor
The
perspective?
exhibitor, thank you, that's the word I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if there's a lot of shows that you go to and, one particular big vendor or a number of big vendors, they have like the over-the-top like trade show booth. It's, like a 20 by 20. They have stuff hanging from the ceilings. They've got screens. I mean, that's like all fine and good, but that's as somebody who also manages our conferences and trade shows, like that is a logistical nightmare. Getting that stuff there and making sure it's, got the proper permits and things of that nature. I mean, like that's just crazy. But is it about the sort of like proverbial pyrotechnics of your booth, or is it about people making really good, genuine connections? I hazard to guess to say it's more about the connection. So how do we spur those on through building out those experiences at shows? But
absolutely. And
I will
providing,
step
like,
off my soapbox.
the soapbox is welcome. I think this is one time where we're the guests on our own show, so we're allowed to be on our soapboxes.
Yeah.
So Alex actually commented on what his would be, and for those who know, Alex is huge on engagement and getting people to actually engage at events, whether it's on social media or in person. But he would love to do a event to educate people on engagement, experience design, not logistics. So almost the opposite of what you're kind of saying, which is really, really cool and really, really exciting. So I'm going to transition that in to another question we got from the audience, which is well, there's a couple on here I think that we could do that I relate to. So let's find, I'm going to hybrid a couple of these questions together. So we talked a little bit about like what kind of big things you want to see. Is there anything you would want to see beyond just guests on the show, any sort of format? And then we'll transition that into, what are the plans for 2017? What are the plans for 2017? I don't know. So is there any sort of like format or something you'd want to see on the show?
Yeah, well, I mentioned it earlier, but I would love to do a couple of shows on the different industries where events are just inherent. So obviously, like the music industry, I know that we've had people from South by Southwest on the show.
Firefly.
Firefly. Those are really cool. The film industry, so how do you plan the Cannes Film Festival? What do the logistics look like for that? How big is their team? Is it just like a super small team, or is it like 30 people in 30 different countries? Who knows? So there's that. And then also, I just love the fleeting nature of fashion shows because they're not too long. They're very over the top. There's props. There's like makeup, hair. Obviously the clothing, like Chanel does, like one year they did this insane theme, and it was airline themed, so it looked like your boarding pass, and then when you got into the building, I think it was an empty hangar, and I think it was in like 2014 or 2015, and it looked like, an airport, and then the people the guys and gals who were walking the runway, it wasn't a catwalk. It was very nonlinear, and it's stuff like that really, really piques my interest on how did they come up with a theme and come up with all the little elements that really bring it together.
So you like those deep dives of like one specific event that
yeah, and then it's over. It's over after 15 minutes, like all your hard work. So I would love to kind of see what it's like for that. But nice. What's the show that you want to see in 2017?
Oh, what do I want to see on format? This is hard because I feel like it's not fair because I'm in charge of it. So like what I want happens. I'm like, I want less people on the show. Boom, done. So yeah, I talked about like the couple people that I'd love to have on the show. I don't want to go back to that. That's a really tough word. Like I'm trying to think like formatting. I want to do shows where I like kind of what we did at IMEX. It doesn't GoToWebinar is not really designed for it, but doing it like we set up a webcam, we do 2 microphones going into 1 computer, and we do the GoToWebinar right there with 2 people in person. I've been wanting to do stuff like that more often, just because it's different and it's extremely challenging, and it was really exciting to do at IMEX. But there's definitely something a little bit different about sitting like that. Me and Laura could high five right now would be really different. But there's also nice things about the way we do it now. Like, for example, Laura can be in DC and I can be in Phoenix, and we do our things and kind of go from there. So, and yeah, Alex has a very good point. This is something I'd love to see for 2017. I don't know if it's going to be possible. It was very reliant on our platform and what we used to go to. It was a sacrifice that we made. But Alex says, I want to see chat back amongst the viewers. Hashtag rest in peace, Blab. Obviously, you could ask questions during the whole entire show. So basically, that's one reason, just so you guys know, is why we have Alex here to ignite, that's the word I'm looking for, the conversation on Twitter. So moving away from just doing the show on here where we're kind of, you get to ask questions but we don't get to chat back. We want to move that conversation and stuff like what we were talking about between Julius, Nick, and Aaron on Twitter just now a couple minutes ago wouldn't have ever happened before. So hopefully we'll see more of that. So plans for 2017, we're just going to keep doing awesome things. We're not shutting down. We're not slowing down yet. We got more. We already have like half of our a quarter of our guests already lined up and good to go. If it was half of our guests, that'd be amazing. But yeah, we basically have the next, 12 episodes, 13 episodes already lined up and good to go. And we're going to be filling up even more throughout the year. So really, really exciting. More and more. And Twitter conversation hopefully will evolve as well. So I'm realizing we're 21 minutes over right now. We are so interested in each other that we just kept talking. Yeah. But that's okay. So why don't we kind of end it on? I want to end on this new question that Alex, again, shout out to Alex. Alex is amazing. Came up with this question, and we asked it in the last show. And I think it's going to become a mainstay. So question for you, Laura, and we'll wrap up after this question, is if you weren't doing events or doing what you do now, community management, what would you do?
Jeez. That's a good one. I would say, okay, probably number one, and for those of you that don't know this, you're going to learn a little factoid about me. I work at a craft brewery on the side, and I've been there for almost 5 years. So a very long time. It has spanned a number of, 9 to 5 jobs. And I'd probably brew beer. That's probably what I'd do.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your favorite type of beer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like dark beers. Honestly, I'm an equal opportunity beer drinker. There's no bad beer out there. I mean, there's bad beer, but I mean, no bad beer styles. I just love trying new beer. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay.
What about you, Will?
Laura.
You a DJ? I know you were a DJ in your past life.
Yeah, I was a DJ in my past life. So this is my kind of goes back to what I originally was I used to do. I did vlogging way back in the day with the DJ company and stuff like that. I've done everything, but it's really tough to say because by basically being the founder of a company, is that I get to do whatever I really want to do. I mean, obviously I have to do what grows the company and keeps our clients happy, but a lot of what I do, I decided I want to host a podcast. Boom, I did it. I want to do inbound marketing. Boom, we did it. If I didn't do this, though, it's a really hard question. I get asked this all the time, and I never have a good answer, and I always change it. Right now, today, it would probably be inbound marketing because I am a huge fanatical marketer. I love creating content, but it's one of those things I think is really good because you're helping people out, educating people, but I'm also just really good at it. And so it's kind of this marriage between what you're good at and what really is really good. So I'd say that's definitely inbound marketing. All right, cool. So we're gonna end the episode right there, an hour and 23 minutes in, which is awesome. But we are just so excited. It's been one whole year since we've done this show, and there's another amazing year in years to come. If you guys are watching this right now, tune in next week live because this is going to be an episode you don't want to miss. We have an amazing lineup. I'm not going to reveal who they are. I'm just going to give you a little teaser on the topic. We're doing 2017 event trends. So if you want to know what's going to be popular next year and what you need to be ready for, this is the episode to watch. So definitely tune in next week. It's going to be absolutely exciting. We're going to have more guests, not just me and Laura and Sean talking. Rest in peace, Sean. We will miss you. But we hope you guys all tune in next week for another amazing episode of Hashtag Event Icons. We're going to get out of here and go relax and enjoy some beer. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of Hashtag Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxton and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with Hashtag Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Hashtag Event Icons.